feel like they were there too. But so hello everybody, I'm Allie Moran. I'm a senior, I'm one of the co-presidents of the pre-med club. And if just the other officers can just pop up to say what their role is and whatnot, that'd be great.
There you go. Hi all,
yeah, you
I am the treasurer and I'm really excited. I'm a sophomore biology major and I'm excited that we can all be here on Zoom.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandra Filkowski, but you guys can call me Allie. I'm the vice president of the pre-med club and I'm a junior and I'm a psych major on the pre-med track, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all.
Should I go? Okay.
Yeah, you can go.
My name is Emily Baishamore, junior here, studying biology, minoring in health sciences and biochem. And I'm
All right. And we have two other members, Rebecca Belmont, she's a junior. She's also one of the co-presidents, and Phil Scally, I don't know if I'm saying his last name correctly, but he's our COSO rep. So they're probably just hopping on this call a couple minutes from here. But thank you all for coming, to our meeting via Zoom. And so for our first meeting, I thought it'd be great to have our advisor, Dr. Church, just, come in and talk kind of about everything med school, Fairfield Medical Committee Board, and just have some Q&As at the end. So definitely, if you have some questions, write it down as you go along. And then at the end, we can all ask him. Oh, Rebecca's here too. You could introduce yourself, Rebecca. Sorry, I didn't see you.
It's okay, no worries. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca. I'm a junior biology major on the pre-med track. I have minors in health studies and studio art, and I am also the co-president.
Great, perfect. So Dr. Church, if you wanted to take it away and just start telling us, all things med school and what we should be doing.
All right. Yeah, I can do that. And feel free to just shout out a question or just ask for a clarification as you're confused, rather than holding it. That's fun for me to stop and explain. Otherwise, I tend to ramble. So thank you to the club for having me, but thank you to the e-board members for conceiving of this and setting it up. So I'm very happy to be here. We've never done this before, and we haven't done it in a live scenario either. So this is the sort of first of its kind. And I understand some of the other programs that's coming up. So I think that'll be pretty useful for you. If you do in fact have all of the other health professions committee members speak, you'll be pretty enlightened to what those folks are thinking about every year when they review Fairfield students for letters of evaluation. So I'll get to that and everything else that you want me to talk about. So again, thanks to the club and the executive board members. I want to thank, I see Will Spack on here. I love the Bruins flag in the background. Way to go. So
that is my roommate's, not mine.
Well, I'll take it anyway. So it looks a little yellow in here. The room is painted yellow, and I guess the soft lighting or whatever, but all of you guys seem nice and brightly lit, except for me. So, it's interesting that you all introduce yourselves as, bio major or psych major, whatever your major is, but also as pre-med, because essentially anybody on here is supposed to be pre-med. So I'm the only non-pre-med on this Zoom tonight, which is kind of funny. But you've got questions, I've got answers. I didn't script a whole lot of things. I mean, I can regularly talk for hours if somebody asks me about pre-health, or someone's asking me about what Fairfield does or what it's like. So I will just talk really in some broad strokes, and then hopefully just start to take questions based on those things, or if I left anything out, certainly ask me about that. But essentially, as pre-meds, you all know that academics are paramount. If you can't succeed in the relevant coursework and in general academically, it's going to be very difficult to get to medical school, at least within a reasonable time frame from Fairfield. It's possible that if things go really poorly for you, there are some things you can do for a couple years after graduation to then make it possible. But I would say the academics is the number one thing that everybody needs to sort of guard or pay attention to. while you are an undergrad. Which is not to say that, you know, the only thing that's important is a transcript and a GPA. It can really open some doors for you, and it can close some doors for you, but it is not at all the only thing that medical schools are looking for in order to evaluate whether or not you'd be a good student and whether or not you'd make a good, you know, medical professional after that training is over. So academics is a big piece. I think most everybody, except for the, you know, the brand new students, and there's a few on here, which is great, are aware of what all the prerequisites are. So let me just run through those in terms of what schools want to see on your transcript and or what you would need for the MCAT, because they're not always the same. Some schools actually are pretty light on their prereqs because they know the MCAT is going to force you to have learned some content. So there, you know, some schools are have zero math requirement because they assume, you know, every college requires it, and they don't want to stipulate, you know, you must have stat or you must have calc. So you know, that's falling by the wayside. Many schools have shifted over to students being able to demonstrate competencies in particular areas. So if they wanted to make sure that you understood psychology, but you didn't have, you know, Gen Psych on your transcript, if you could point to some other kinds of courses where you've gotten some of that content or life experience, they may say, okay, you've met that requirement. But in most cases, it's going to be kind of standard. Schools are looking to see, do you have a year of general biology? Do you have a year of general chemistry, a year of organic chemistry? They may or may not require biochem, but biochem certainly is on the medical college admission test. So unless you can teach it to yourself, you probably should take one or both biochems that are offered at Fairfield U. Physics 1 and 2, also usually a prereq, sometimes not.
Yeah, winter shit.
What's that? Oh, I thought that was a question for me. So sometimes physics may not be a prerequisite, but certainly it's on the MCAT. So, you know, unless you're willing to give away that 20% of the physical science section on the MCAT, you're going to take physics and make sure you understand it. So that's really the standard set of classes.
What about,
yes, there is.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is Orgo needed, or do they not include that anymore?
You know, they're willing to take different chemistries now. I mean, some schools are hard and fast, you want to see Orgo 1 and 2, but they're, you know, on some campuses, you can take biochemistry before or in place of organic. And so if somebody has a year of biochem, they might find that sufficient because there's some real overlap between the aspects of biochem and organic chemistry. So, but my recommendation for everybody at Fairfield, just so that I feel like I'm giving you the best advice, is to have all of those courses listed. So the year of Gen Bio, Gen Chem, Organic Chem, Physics, and then Psych. I don't know that Psych is really a prerequisite usually, but it is on the MCAT. And so students that maybe took AP Psych but didn't even bother or couldn't, for whatever reason, transfer that, you know, AP credit onto the Fairfield transcript, you're fine as long as you can remember it or go back and relearn it for the MCAT. But most people will just take it as because you're going to get credit for it, and it's a good refresher for the MCAT. So those, you know, 9 or 10 courses, depending on your background or depending what you've transferred into Fairfield when you got here, are pretty standard for everybody. And what you do beyond that is totally up to you. Your major can be anything you want. Those of you that have been around for a while know that I say that over and over again. If you got a compelling story behind why you chose your major, then schools are going to be interested in that. Even if it's, you know, you're yet another bio major, and there's, you know, tens of thousands of those in the applicant pool every year. They want to know why you chose that, even though it's the most common major, but they certainly want to know what motivated you to major in philosophy at the same time that you're going pre-med. So your major is something for you to, you know, hopefully appreciate and work really hard at because you love it, or you at least like it a whole lot. And it's an opportunity, if you talk about it the right way, it's an opportunity for you to have yourself stand out to an admissions committee. But just by title, nothing's really going to stand out unless it's a very rare kind of major, and it might catch an eye, but, you know, you still have to have a good application behind it. So upper level courses that I think are are really important for pre-meds to consider taking are sort of mid-level biology courses, genetics, and human physiology. If you're a bio major or minor, you have access to those. If you're not, you have to beg and plead to see if you can get a seat. But you have to wait for everybody else to register. And if any seats are open and you've had Gen Bio 1 and 2, you might be able to get into those upper levels. But the reason I'm talking about those two in particular at the moment, because there's a couple more, is that they really, I think, reinforce the content from Gen Bio 1 and Gen Bio 2 that you do find on the MCAT. So nobody needs to take a genetics course in order to get into med school or in order to be ready for the MCAT, but it certainly helps. You know, a lot of the concepts in genetics will reinforce all of the gene regulation and protein and DNA, RNA structure, all that stuff. So a lot of reinforcement for Gen Bio 1 if you take genetics. And then similar to that, if you take human phys, it's going to reinforce all the organ system stuff that you learned in Gen Bio 2. And, you know, there's plenty of that on the MCAT. So I like those two for that purpose. They also help to set you up for success in medical school. I've had some, you know, some recent alumni contact me and say, you know, they cruised right through their genetics unit as a first-year medical student because they took genetics, and you know, they had some classmates that never did, and the med schools don't know where people are starting out, so you know, they start a little bit lower. So anything that ends up being sort of related to the content you'll see in medical school, if nothing else, it can make your first year of medical school a little bit easier. You know, you'll have more of a foundation when you get there. But it's okay if you just have sort of the minimum set of prereqs or the minimum amount of content to help you get through the MCAT. But I like those two mid-level bio courses as things that can really supplement and perhaps help you for the MCAT. There are some upper-level bios beyond that for those of you that are sort of eligible, and some of those require mid-level bios. But I think cell biology is a great course. I think that molecular biology with Dr. Braun is good. Immunology, really challenging course that Dr. Braun teaches, but the content she covers and the sort of the depth in that course can really have you learn some stuff that other students aren't going to know, and set you up for some success in that area. I was going to say it, but forgot 5 minutes ago. I don't think anybody needs to take Intro to Sociology or a specific sociology course because of the content that is on the MCAT. You certainly can, but there's no one sociology course that will give you all of that content anyway. And for those of you that don't know, there are 4 sections on the MCAT, and one of them is called the psychosocial determinants of health. And about 65% of that is Gen Psych, you know, most of what you'd learn in general psychology. About 5% or so, depending on the test that you eventually take, you know, the day you take it. About 5% or so of biology that kind of underpins how the brain works and, you know, how impulses are transmitted and things like that. And then the rest is, so about 30%, the rest is sociology, the sort of social determinants of health. Most students now, the new MCAT has been out since the spring of 2015. So you know, people have been taking it for about 5 years now. And no one is really reporting that they felt that they were at any kind of disadvantage by not having a particular sociology course or any sociology course. So if you know what the content is, you can learn that stuff pretty effectively. We could talk about MCAT prep a little bit later. So that's it for courses for now, but I can entertain any questions about courses right now if you have them, or we can circle back to that. But I said right at the start, academics is you know, your biggest challenge probably, and one of the most important things. In all of that work that you're doing with your classes and academics, hopefully you are getting to know and hopefully impressing some of your professors, and all of you, whether you go through Fairfield U as an applicant through the committee process, or you just apply on your own, you cannot apply without letters of support or letters of recommendation. And some of those need to, if you go through the committee here, 3 of them need to be from faculty. And so you need to let those folks get to know you a bit. And if you don't, you know, talk to them outside of, you know, just purely the content in the course, it's hard for them to know anything about you. So you know, it's okay, and they want to know about your career goals and aspirations and who you hang out with on and off campus, and what kind of person you are and what motivates you and things like that. So most of us are pretty interesting people, I think, if you talk to us and get to know us. So let yourself be a little bit open with the faculty, get to know them, let them get to know you. You'll end up getting much better letters from them. And I've seen, I think now, thousands of letters over the years from faculty. It's really obvious when somebody doesn't know a student well, and they're really just talking about the grades and the numerical performance on assignments and things like that. And that's a little useful, but it's like the least meaningful thing we're going to get from a faculty letter. We really want to know what they've learned about your personality, your motivation, the way you work with others, your intellectual curiosity, things like that. So talk to those folks and let them know what you're trying to do. And that, medicine is a big thing for you that you're headed toward. And it may spark some conversations that end up being really important. So beyond academics, there's the MCAT. I don't really want to talk about it until I get some specific questions, because I could ramble about the MCAT for a long time. But that's the other big sort of metric that schools are going to use to compare you to other students. It's for them, for med schools, it's probably the most reliable metric, because the MCAT is the same for everybody. As long as you take the same version of the MCAT, you can catch two very different versions on 2 different days. But for the most part, it's the one thing that all pre-meds pretty much have to do as part of the process. And so that's the first thing that admissions committees will tend to take a look at to help figure out if somebody fits the kind of profile of the applicants they typically take. Now, every school is free to take anybody they want. So, you could have a 10th percentile MCAT and potentially get an acceptance offer, but you would need some pretty extreme circumstances to explain why your MCAT was so low. And you'd need some really, impressive things in other areas of a future or potential application in order to make up for that. And so there is no one size fits all, but there is kind of a one size fits most kind of mentality. At least it seems like that to me when I look at, who Fairfield is sending out as applicants, where they're accepted and where they interview and how things work out. You do kind of want to fit the profile of, being near the average MCAT score for accepted students, being near the average science and overall GPA for accepted students at that school. And it can be very different, if you're comparing Harvard and East Carolina University or something like that. So, think about that. Something we talk about all the time individually in one-on-one sessions. So aside from those metrics, really the 2 things that are left are the clinical piece and then everything that's not clinical, which is essentially, I just call extracurricular. It's like everything you're doing that's not academic and that's not clinical and isn't the MCAT. It falls under that huge umbrella of extracurricular. But that one is a really important category, because oftentimes it's how you folks will differentiate yourselves from other applicants. If you've done some really interesting things, or you've done something really well for a long time, and your ability to hammer away at something or stick to it, whatever it is, can be really intriguing to an admissions committee, or somebody who's done a healthy little bit of a ton of different things. It isn't maybe not a specialist in one particular area, but can talk about anything, because they seemingly have done a little bit of everything. So that can be good too. It's, the sky's the limit in terms of extracurriculars. The big one for the committee at Fairfield, and certainly admissions committees at a lot of schools, is some sort of record of service or volunteerism, or a commitment to that kind of behavior, because it tends to suggest that you genuinely care about other people and making a difference. And like it or not, if you stay at Fairfield and you apply from Fairfield, you're going to be a student coming from a Jesuit school, and most of the med schools that you are interested in, or historically that our students are interested in, they know what Fairfield's all about. They know that as a Jesuit school, it's part of our mission to try to train everyone to be men and women for others. And so even more than just the regular expectation that someone going into healthcare should have tried to help some people in some way, before they get to their medical training. Certainly you can help people as a physician once you're trained. But they might, the bar might be a little bit higher from some admissions committees' perspectives. And it's something that I have to, or I write about when I write those committee letters on behalf of the committee, and they'll point it out, or we'll all discuss it. If somebody's really lacking an effort to engage in any kind of volunteer activity, or just in some way helping their fellow human, that sticks out to us, because the university, different offices and faculty, they're really doing a lot to try to make students aware of these opportunities to try to make a difference. And so if you've kind of just been deaf to that the whole time, that's a tough hurdle to get over as an applicant. So focus on that one. Check in on that sort of aspect of your preparation all the time, and make sure you've been doing a little something. Other things under that category, I put research there. You can think of research as an academic thing. I sort of lump it with extracurricular. It can be great, but not everybody has to have research as a pre-med. It really depends on the schools that you're targeting. Some of them you'll notice if you look at the applicant profile, and they're pretty public about this, they'll show you 90% of the students that apply there have research experience. And so if you don't, you may want to consider whether or not you've got a good shot at that school, or if it's early enough, do you want to include some research so that you at least have some of that as an applicant? You look like the typical applicant for that particular program. Sports can be tremendously helpful as an extracurricular. Our student athletes have to do a ton of extra work that the non-athletes don't have to do. They have roughly at least a 20-hour commitment per week, at least in season. So, being able to balance all of that with the academic and the need to figure out how and when to get clinical experience. If you can do all that and you still have the grades and you still have everything else, that really speaks volumes. And some of our most successful medical school applicants have been student athletes. So if you keep your head above water, then you got a really good shot. But it's I understand it's a very difficult workload. All right, so that's a bit of an overview. Let me just mention the committee and the committee review process, and then I'll try to just shut up and only answer questions at that point. So for those of you that make it to the end, so to speak, and actually are applying to medical school, I would say most of you are going to go through a committee evaluation process. So Fairfield U, part of the health professions program, we have the health professions committee. And I'll just tell you the makeup of the committee and then exactly what they do. So there's always 7 faculty members on the committee, plus the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. So that's Dean Greenwald, if you don't know who our Dean is. And then the 7 members, there's always representation from the sciences. And then we have 1 humanities, social science additional person, and 1 at-large member, meaning the at-large member could come from anywhere. It could be nursing, engineering, could be another arts and science person. It's kind of up to the dean to decide who to appoint to the committee. But people tend to stay there for several years, and then if they get busy with something else, they may step off and somebody else comes in. So we've had some turnover in the last few years. So currently, we've got biology, chemistry, physics, and mathematics represented sort of by law, if you will. It's written into the governance document. And then beyond that, we have psychology represented and I suppose communications. So our at-large member is Dr. Michael Pagano, who some of you know. He teaches health comm. He sometimes teaches intro to health studies or capstone. And Jessica Karanian from the psychology department is our sort of social science humanities person on the committee. And then the 4 science members are Dr. Baselli from physics, Dr. Glenn Sauer from biology. Most of you would know him from biochemistry. or perhaps some Gen Bio labs from time to time. Chemistry is Dr. Gary Weddle, and mathematics is, hopefully she's back this year with us, Dr. Streley, Janet Streley. But Sean Rafalski stepped in last year because Dr. Streley's had National Science Foundation work she was doing that took her away. So those 7 people plus the dean. So 8 people will essentially have the opportunity to vote on your candidacy as an applicant from Fairfield University who's going on to medical school. And they don't vote whether or not you're allowed to apply. I mean, that is totally up to you. What they're voting on is the level or ranking for your letter of evaluation, which if you get to the point of having a committee review, you are guaranteed a letter. If you go through the process, I will end up writing a letter unless you tell me not to. And so what the committee's job is to do is to determine where we're going to put you on any of 5 levels of evaluation. And so we can go from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top. The lowest level, nobody wants. That is just a straight up not recommended. And what that means from the committee is not only are they, that they really feel that they can't be supportive, it also suggests that they don't think that in a timely manner you'd be able to fix something and come back to the committee to see if you could be reevaluated. It doesn't mean that you can't get where you need to be, but it suggests that you're going to need to essentially leave Fairfield. You'd be almost, the youngest you'd be as a rising senior. So you'd be close to graduation, or you already would have graduated by the time we do our review. And that would suggest that you really need to go do something. It might be a post-baccalaureate program. You might need to revisit a whole bunch of classes if your grades aren't there. And you would get feedback from me if that were, you get feedback no matter what, but I let people know the level of evaluation, but I don't get into specifics, primarily because we leave ourselves open to litigation. And it's just not fun being sued because there's, we do a very good job. We are very above board. I've worked with some of the colleagues on the committee for years. And so if we gave you all the nitty-gritty details, you could find things to pick apart and potentially make a legal case and kind of, destroy the normal function of the program for a while we try to deal with that. So essentially, we'll tell you where we've ranked you in broad strokes. We'll let you know why, and we'll tell you what you should be working on. And no matter who you are, no matter how high, even if you get the top ranking, there's probably a couple of things that I'm going to communicate that, hey, during the application cycle, just try to work on this a little bit. It's one area where, you still have a little bit of weakness. Okay, so the lowest level is not recommended. Very few people get that answer because if you're a good pre-med, you're working with me along the way and I'm letting you know, hey, you're doing better and better and better. And you're, sort of theoretically, I see you rising in the rankings for what the committee is going to think when you come up for a review. So anybody that gets a not recommended, they knew from me going in that I was a little anxious and that, I probably would have told that student, you're not ready, but it's up to you. When you feel you're ready, you can go for it. If you submit the paperwork, we will do the review. The next level up is recommended with reservation. And what that means is that the committee, in a sense, is recommending you, but they have maybe a serious concern about one particular thing, but they think that you have the ability to address that during the application cycle. And so you might be okay by the time you matriculate. So if it was an academic thing and we felt like you really hadn't proven yourself yet academically, during the year that it takes to go through the application cycle, if you crush it, in a bunch of new classes that are relevant and challenging, then you've kind of answered that question. But at the time that we make our decision, the committee I charge them with answering a specific question, which is at this time, at the moment that we review you, are you ready to begin medical school? Even though it's a year before you start. And that language is very clearly explained to the medical schools that are receiving it. So a med school could go, okay, you were looking, are they ready today? And you're saying you think they might be. you're recommending, but with a reservation, meaning they might be able to get where they need to be by the time they matriculate, or by the time they, 6 months later, by the time they interview with the med school. But we're just not sure, and we're not willing to say, here's a student that's going to be fine. And so, again, you would get feedback from me if that were the decision of the committee, and it would be that there are far too many little things you need to work on that all add up to a big enough concern, or it's one big area, like perhaps academics or perhaps clinical. If somebody's never shadowed, we don't have any evidence they've really even spoken to a physician outside of their own pediatric checkups or something, then we'll really question if that student knows what they're doing and what they're getting themselves into. So beyond there, the top 3 levels are recommended with confidence, which, to get back to that language that I just mentioned, as of today, as a student ready to begin medical school, we say yes. We recommend you confidently. You fit the mold of somebody who can do it. We have enough history of sending students out there and knowing that they've performed well, that if you kind of fit that model for what we've seen in the past, we know that you're going to be fine. You will struggle like every other medical student, and you'll have some days where you cry, but we know that you can make it. Essentially, we have a full confidence that you can handle it. And in your committee letter, if there are, not only handle it, but if there are some real strengths, and I'm going to point that out because I wanted admissions committee to see it and go, here's a student that Fairfield believes in. Oh, and they have this really interesting thing in their background, and maybe that pushes you up in their rankings. But it wouldn't have been enough for us to push you up to the second highest level, which is highly recommended. And so roughly in that category, it's not only a student we know can make it, but you do bring some really nice extras to the table as an applicant. Perhaps you've done a couple of years of research, and that's a really impressive part of your candidacy, not just because you've done it, but because you're passionate about it. You can break it down and explain it during an interview. We can see that you can think like a scientist or like a researcher, so that grades being really good, but having a really significant sort of research background can be enough to bump you into that upper category. You could just be a little bit better than everybody else across multiple categories. So, you're a little bit too strong to just say recommended with confidence. It might be, that you break into the highly recommended group that way. Or it could be, 2 really solid things beyond what most of the sort of recommended with confidence applicants have. And then the very highest group, and I'll give you sort of percentage breakdowns for the proportion of the population of students that get ranked this way. But we're getting into the weeds a little bit. But the very highest level is called very highly recommended. And it's not a very sexy title, but it's what we've used for years. And it denotes our students that really are just fantastic. There is no question that they are going to hit the ground running in medical school. They will be students that everybody notices for various reasons, because they can have multiple different things in their background, but they have just, a lot of times the whole way through or the last half of their education really impressed people in multiple ways. Their extracurriculars, their academics, their the clinical letters we're getting. If 3 doctors are saying that you're in the top 1% of pre-meds they've ever mentored, and and if it's somebody who's got 30 years of experience in medicine, they don't lie about that stuff. So if we're reading a letter about a student and then somebody else says the same thing, it's gonna turn our head, and it's gonna help you as an applicant as well. So those students, I would say, nowadays nobody can crack that top tier without a significant commitment to service. If that's not there, you're out of the running. As a Jesuit school, that's something we think you should value. So you need to demonstrate a sort of commitment to your fellow human being. It doesn't mean you have to, do like medical service stuff. You just have to do some things that show that you try to help other people out. And a lot of that could even be stuff you do on campus for fellow students, but it's got to be there for us. So roughly that group is maybe the top 10% of applicants reviewed by the committee within the top 3 groups. So of the people that are sort of, the committee's like, go for it. Recommended with confidence, highly recommended, very highly recommended among those. So it's already a selective group. It's a top 10% of those three categories, out of those three. The highly recommended is, from there down to sort of within the top 25%, maybe 30-ish. It's not like, we don't get out a calculator and figure out how we're allowed to rank somebody. And then everybody else out of those three would end up with a recommended with confidence. So most students are likely to be recommended with confidence, but most of those students are getting in. So it does seem to work. It doesn't mean you're somehow deficient as an applicant if you get the RC, so recommended with confidence. All right, so that's way too much about the ranking, but those are the sorts of things we're looking at. The committee has access to all of the letters of support that you provide to us from faculty, from clinical mentors, from coaches, from work supervisors, from whomever you want. You pick anybody you want. There are some that we won't read. So if you have your best friend write a letter, that's not going to help us, because of course they would be saying nice things about you. So somebody who knows you in kind of a professional capacity. So we've got those letters. We can do a deep dive into your transcript. Many of us know you as students. When you think about those faculty across biology, chemistry, physics, math, psych, Pagano, and you've got a mix of people that somebody's probably seen you and knows a bit about you. Some students, everybody knows. Everybody on the committee has had that student or knows about that student because they have such an impact and their colleagues talk about it. So we have access to all of that plus an interview as part of the committee review process. You would interview with almost always me and one other committee member. Every once in a while I can't, we get schedule-wise, we get jammed up and I'm not in on an interview, but it's usually me for consistency on every interview, and then one other committee member, and we just roll through, looking at people's schedules. So whoever you get as your interviewer, in addition to me, is just based on your schedule matching theirs. It's got nothing to do with your background or, you're a psych major, and so Dr. Kranian is in there with me. It could work out that way, but it's relatively random. And we bring that interview feedback back to the committee. We usually interview in the month of April, and then the committee meets mid-May, usually around senior week each year. And then I let the candidates know within 4 to 6 days after the review what the result is. Okay, so sort of the last thing you're working for at Fairfield is that committee letter, and hopefully the best one you can get, basically. And I'll write the best ones that I can. I have never, as far as I know, I have never poached material from an old letter from a different student to kind of write about a new student. And I get asked that question all the time because I've written hundreds of these things now over the years. You're all different. It's easier for me if I just, it's a blank piece of paper with, there's stuff in there that's relevant to about Fairfield in general. But then I just start to populate it with the information about who you are. So you do your part, we will represent you as honestly, but as in the most supportive way possible, because we want you to succeed. So I put a lot of effort and concern into the letters that are going out from Fairfield, because you're asking to have it all wrapped up into one little bundle, and I'm the last person to sort of touch it and really put the Fairfield stamp on it. So I take that very seriously, and that's what I'm focused on every summer, is getting all those letters out and making sure I feel good about them. And sometimes, I've even stopped myself from submitting and felt like, maybe I should go back and look at it one more time. Did I portray the student well in this particular area, or is there another way to, sometimes I'll be, whatever. I think I have the letter done, but something pops into my head and I'm working on something else, and I'll go and dig that letter up and tweak it a little bit before I submit it. So that's a lot. My clock says 5:40. So start giving me questions about any of that. And then if it's stuff I didn't mention at all that sort of seems to fall outside of all this, that's fine too.
Dr. Church, thank you so much for your time so far. I have 2 questions. My first one was, how do you suggest going about getting more shadowing hours during the pandemic?
The first thing I would do is continue to ask, because you may be surprised that it can be very much like it was 12 months ago. So the first thing everybody should do is just inquire, the same way you would have. Now, if you've never asked about shadowing before, this is all new to you, and it's in an environment that's a little crazy. But in general, the first thing to do is just try and see if the standard places that students would have asked, is there a possibility to shadow live? You may find in reaching out that some places say, well, we can't have you come in, but we have an opportunity to do some virtual shadowing, if you will. And so that may be possible. Most people don't really have time to do a whole lot during the academic year, but if you do, if you're an upperclassman, and if you can get off campus and back reliably, you can reach out locally to anybody you're aware of that's out there, or you can talk to me about what you're looking for specifically. Like, maybe you've done some shadowing, but now you really want to see if you can find a pediatrician or some other kind of specific physician, and we can try to figure out who might be out there, who's looked at some students in the past. The good news is that even if you're applying the end of this year, which the very next group coming up, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now, there's going to be a big asterisk next to the summer of 2020 and essentially the 2020-2021 academic year, because there are huge hurdles for a lot of people, for a lot of institutions, and so they're going to know that it was a challenge to find the same kind of opportunities that were there 6 or 12 months ago. So it can be a little frustrating. Some of you students I know had some opportunities that just vanished once COVID spread, and so ask first, and then if that's not working, I would say talk with me. Let me know what you've tried, and I might have some ideas about additional avenues. If you're thinking about winter break and summer breaks where you're back home, you have the most time to do shadowing, and I suppose the most flexibility. But also you're more of a local, if you will, and you have a better chance at really connecting with somebody who might create an opportunity for you. And we might find that we're starting to manage things better in healthcare settings, which is where you all want to go and shadow. And so it might get easier there to shadow, or better there before it gets better just in general out and about in terms of how life is affected by SARS-CoV-2. So consider hitting people up back near home, where you have a little bit more, some more connections, things like that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Church. My next question is, how do you properly document your service hours?
I would say just write them down. There is no official way to document them. If on your future application you list 200 hours at a particular site, let's say you work at the food bank or something, you have to list a contact person for that sort of relevant experience when you apply. And so you have to know that it's possible that a school wants to check up on it, but for the most part, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt. So if you keep track of it and you feel like this is give or take a few hours, I'm being very honest about my 50 hours here or 10 hours there, they'll take your word for it. But just know that they always reserve the right to check on any experiences or call up references, people that have written letters of support. But basically just don't lose track of it. Write it down, put it in a file, save it in your computer, save it in a couple places in case things get lost, so that you can look back and go, oh my God, I've got double the number of hours I thought I had. I just forgot about some things I did freshman year or sophomore year. So it's really on you. Just record it however you like to, but just don't lose it.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much, Dr. Church.
You're welcome.
Does anyone have any more questions? I can't see you all. Okay, there we go.
I can see
no?
it.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, I just had to go to.
I have
speak
a
with you.
Yahoo review going.
Yeah. But I think that may be all. I think if anyone does have any more questions, please don't ever hesitate to DM us on Instagram or email Dr. Church, or if you see one of us in the hallways, you could always ask too. Because I know sometimes on Zoom it could be a little, not intimidating, but awkward or whatnot. So don't hesitate to reach out. But I just wanted to let you all know that our next meeting will probably be October 1st, and we'll have our first committee board member be a guest speaker, which is so exciting after hearing all about it with Dr. Church. Because I know for me, sorry, I'm talking so much. When I was a freshman and sophomore, I really had like no idea kind of what the committee was and like who they were and whatnot. So I feel like having them as speakers will be really awesome to just kind of get to know them. And we have questions written for them, just about like what do they look for, what do they don't look for, what can really set us out, and just learn more about them too as a person. So I think that would be great.
Ellie, if I can jump on that. So
yeah, of course.
If you're here, you heard me, sort of give an overview of who the committee is and what they're charged with and what they have to do.
Yeah.
But then, talking to Dr. Pagano and anybody else that comes in, you can really get into the weeds with them and say, okay, Dr. Church outlined it for us. So what are you thinking when you see this on a transcript? Or what do you think about this kind of clinical? Or I'm thinking of adding this. Would that impress you? Or would it be like, well, perhaps not the best use of your time, things like that. So with Dr. Pagano or anybody else you bring in, really push them on how they view those applicant packets, or what they're looking for during an interview, when they engage in that process, because you may uncover some interesting insights.
Yeah, or even just like questions.
Because we're different and we're older, we probably look at the world a little bit differently, and it'd be good for you to sort of see how we're envisioning these packets, application packets.
And even to get to like ask them what type of questions they would even say in these interviews with the student and you, because even if they gave us like a brief overview or a couple questions, not that we could prep, but almost be a little more comfortable when we do have to go into that situation. So that's what our goal for the club is really, for this semester, is to really get to, crack into this committee board and like get to know them. And we wish we could go on like more field trips and whatnot, but because of COVID and but we're also trying to look for some volunteering opportunities. So if you have any Dr. Church, like virtually, please like send it our way, because that would be great. But yeah, so I think if everyone can come to our meeting again, October 1st, that's a Thursday.
Allie, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Dr. Church, I mentioned this to, I forget, maybe it was Allie or Femi, but I also want to bring in, so my internship this summer, I was in close contact with the Dean of Admissions at Vanderbilt Medical School, and he offered to come in on Zoom meetings whenever with our club. So I'm sure he has a lot of wisdom to share with us about the whole process. So that's also a heads up for the rest of you guys in the club that will definitely be coming up sometime this semester. So we would love to have you.
Those kind of sessions are invaluable. So
that's incredible, Allie.
Make sure you connect on that one, because it's really nice to hear from the people that are sort of making the decisions about who gets in and who doesn't.
Yeah, so definitely stay tuned for definitely Dr. Pagano and definitely the Vanderbilt Dean of Admissions, because that would be incredible. Yeah. So yeah, make sure you guys follow us on Instagram, and always look out on your email. I'll be trying to send mass emails before like the day of an event, just to keep you guys updated. But I don't have any more to say. Does anyone have anything else to say? No? All right. Well,
thank you all for hanging in here.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Look forward to seeing you around or virtually if you're not on campus. And if you are on campus, I'm Zooming advising sessions as well as doing them live. So whatever you're more comfortable with.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who attended.
Take care, everybody.